Hey guys, today we're stepping into a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, the kind lined with roses, pastel mailboxes, and hand-painted "Welcome to the Neighborhood" signs. But behind one of those trimmed hedges, a heartless decision was waiting, one that left a child locked inside a car under a blazing sun, all because of a neighbor's petty vendetta and a twisted sense of control. It can happen to anyone, even you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what city are you listening from and what time is it where you are? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You'd only been in the neighborhood for 3 weeks when the letter started. Hand delivered, no postage, no signature. Just thick cream paper folded neatly in half, left on your front porch with phrases like non-compliant ramp structure or garden decor inconsistent with HOA standards. You didn't care about the lawn ornaments. What mattered was the ramp. You built it yourself. Smooth reinforced, painted the same beige as your trim. You double-checked every measurement, every bolt. Your daughter, 8 years old, nonverbal, and born with severe spastic cerebral palsy, needed to feel the sun on her face to be wheeled into the world without stairs as a barrier. And you thought you were prepared. You hadn't met her yet. Veronica, 50-something, perfectly ironed khaki capris floral blouse, always gripping a clipboard like it was part of her skeleton. Her lawn had signs warning protected by HOA guidelines. You thought it was a joke. It wasn't. The first real encounter came on a Tuesday. You were adjusting the sunshade on your daughter's wheelchair, trying to keep her cool as she gently rocked forward and back, humming in her own little rhythm. You looked up and there she was, not on your lawn, on your ramp, measuring it. You calmly asked if she needed help. She didn't answer. Just flipped a page on her clipboard, scribbled something, walked away. No hi, no eye contact. That's when the roses disappeared. Your daughter loved them. You planted them under her window the day you moved in, pink ones, just like the ones outside her old therapy center. She'd giggle every morning when the wind shook the petals, but by Friday they were gone, dug up, soil still wet. A note left behind read unauthorized planting in visible front yard zone. You could feel it boiling inside you, but you didn't want to make it worse. Your wife always said, pick your battles when you're raising hell for someone who can't speak for herself. So you let that one go. Until the heat wave. Arizona summers don't care how early it is. By 10 a.m., it's already a low-simmering hell. That morning, you rolled your daughter out in her sun hat and cooling vest, planning a short stroll. She loved watching the hummingbirds near the mailboxes. You always parked your SUV under the big elm near the corner. It offered the only reliable patch of shade. You buckled her in, gave her a cool water bottle, turned the AC on full blast, and told her daddy's just running inside for sunscreen 30 seconds. You were inside for 5 minutes. 5. That's how long it took. When you came back out, your daughter was still inside the car. But the doors were locked. The AC was off. The keys were gone. And your daughter's arms were flapping in panic, her face red, her soft whimpers already rising into strained cries. You froze just for a second. Then you heard it. Click. The sound of a gate latching. You turned and saw her, Veronica, walking briskly across the street, holding your car keys. You didn't even have time to shout before she turned, smiled, and said, she shouldn't be left unattended. I'm filing a report. You didn't think. You ran. Yanked open the passenger door, locked, pounded the driver's window. Nothing. Your daughter's arms were trembling now, her eyes glazed. You raced back to your house, grabbed the spare key, and sprinted barefoot to the car. Unlocked it. Threw open the door. The heat hit you like a wave. Her seat was burning. You pulled her into your arms, her cooling vest limp, her water bottle untouched on the floorboard. Her breaths were shallow. You called 911. The operator asked, is she conscious? You said, barely. The operator asked, do you know who locked her in? You whispered, yes. And then your voice cracked. I know exactly who did it. Paramedics were on the way. You sat on the grass with your daughter in your lap, fanning her with your shirt, begging her to stay awake. Across the street, Veronica was on her porch, scribbling on her clipboard again. You didn't remember standing up, but you did. And you crossed that street with your daughter still in your arms, Trembling, sticky with sweat, her breath shallow and uneven. Veronica didn't flinch. She stood on her porch like she'd just filed a noise complaint, not locked a disabled child in a vehicle under direct sun. Her clipboard was pressed tight against her chest now. Her mouth was pursed like she was offended. "Where are my keys?" You stared at her. Blinked once, twice. "Your keys!" Your voice was calm, but inside, you were fire. She pointed a finger, practically stabbing the air. "You're not allowed to leave a vehicle idling unattended. It's a safety hazard. It's in Section 4 of the Sunstone Ridge HOA covenant." You stepped forward, she stepped back. "I was gone 5 minutes. "You left her alone," she said, chin raised. "You left her unsupervised. That's endangerment. I had the right to intervene." You almost laughed. Intervene. What she did wasn't intervention. It was sabotage. Your daughter whimpered again in your arms, too weak to cry, but the heat hadn't finished with her. And in that moment, something shifted, because neighbors were now peeking through blinds. One man on the corner porch was holding his coffee, still midair frozen. A woman with curlers in her hair held her phone up from behind a flower box, clearly recording. Someone else stepped out from the duplex across the street, and he saw it all. Your girl, your trembling arms, the sweat pooling in the creases of her knees. He called out, "Do you need water?" You nodded. He ran. But Veronica kept going. "I'm going to need to file an incident report. You can't just raise your voice in public. That's borderline aggression. I have it all recorded." You didn't care about her recording. You wanted one. Because what came next, the world needed to see. The ambulance arrived 3 minutes later. The paramedics checked vitals fast. Temp was high, skin hot to the touch. They got her on oxygen immediately. And then one of them turned to you and asked the question no parent wants to hear. How long was she in the heat? You didn't say 5 minutes. You said, "Ask her," and pointed directly at Veronica. They did. She smiled again, so casual, like she was offering feedback at a bake sale. "She was alone when I walked by, so I took the keys to prevent harm. I was ensuring community safety." The paramedic, a woman named Charisse, turned and stared at her. Silent, processing, and then said the words that sent a chill down every neighbor's spine. "You locked a nonverbal, physically disabled child in a car during a heat advisory on purpose." Veronica's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "I was protecting her." The second paramedic had already called for police backup. What started as a medical emergency just became a potential felony. But it didn't stop there. Because while the paramedics loaded your daughter into the ambulance, something else happened. One of the neighbors stepped forward. The guy with the coffee, name tag still on from the grocery store. "I have a ring cam. It caught everything." Another voice chimed in. "So do I. I saw her walking away with the keys." Someone else checked mine too. She was staring in the window before she even crossed the street. The dominoes were falling. But the moment that changed everything came right after the police cruiser pulled up. Not one, but two officers stepped out. They were calm, professional, until one of them, a younger guy with sergeant stripes on his shoulder, saw the footage. He didn't speak for a full 10 seconds, and then quietly said, "That's enough to trigger a child endangerment arrest." Veronica gasped. "This is harassment. I'm on the HOA board. I was following code. I was documenting." You almost couldn't believe what you were hearing, still clinging to that clipboard like it was a legal shield. But the officers didn't care about her clipboard. They cared about the video. They cared about your daughter's oxygen mask and the red marks on her thighs where the seatbelt had practically branded her. They took your statement. They took witness statements. They watched the video. And 5 minutes later, they read Veronica her rights. Right there on her perfect porch with her perfect little flower wreath and her hand-painted HOA strong sign in the window. She kept saying it was all a mistake, that you'd be embarrassed once the full story came out, that she was doing what any responsible neighbor would do, but nobody was buying it. And then came the helicopters. It wasn't one of those quiet news days. No, someone had called a cousin at Channel 9. Said, "You need to get here now." Said a neighborhood HOA president just got arrested for locking a disabled child in a car. And they came. The thumping sound of rotors hit first. The press van rolled in next. By noon, Veronica's face was on 3 local stations. And the only footage they played again and again was her walking calmly across the street. Your car in the background. Your daughter's small hand weakly slapping at the inside window. You didn't have to say a word. The footage spoke loud enough. And for the first time, she was the one who couldn't speak. You didn't go home right away. You rode in the ambulance with your daughter holding her hand the whole time. The paramedics were calm but focused. They worked quickly, cooling pads under her arms, cold V fluids, ready vitals monitored every mile. At the hospital, a pediatric ER nurse named Jasmine greeted you with practiced compassion. "We've got her," she said, as if her voice alone could hold your world together. And for a few hours it did. Your daughter stabilized. Her oxygen levels returned to normal. A doctor told you the cooling vest likely saved her from heat stroke, though it had started to fail in the car. 5 more minutes, he said, and we'd be having a very different conversation. You didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, you sat by her bedside, brushing her hair back with trembling fingers. Her eyes fluttered open at one point, not fully, but enough for her to see you. Enough for her to reach toward your chest and curl her fingers into your shirt. That was when you let yourself breathe. Meanwhile, back at Sunstone Ridge, the videos spread like wildfire. What started with a single neighbor's Ring cam became a network of digital witnesses. Veronica had strutted through that morning like she was untouchable, clipboard in one hand, car keys in the other. Now every angle of her so-called intervention was online. One camera showed her pacing by the car before you even went inside. Another caught her pulling gloves from her back pocket before reaching into your SUV to grab the keys. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. And the neighborhood knew it. You returned home just before sunset. Your daughter was sleeping peacefully, her vitals stable. You carried her inside while your wife, who had caught the next flight in, opened the front door, hands shaking, eyes rimmed red. The ramp was still there. But now there were flowers, not yours. Someone had lined both sides with small potted marigolds and handwritten notes. One read, "We see you. We're sorry." Another, "Your daughter is welcome here." You weren't sure whether to be touched or furious it had taken this much to make them see her. And then came the knock. Not police, not media. It was Harold, the quiet man from down the block, with the husky mix and the wide brim hat. He held out a thumb drive. Every frame. Backed up. Time-stamped, in case she gets a lawyer. You didn't ask how he got it, you just thanked him. But here's where things got even darker. Because 2 days later, you got a letter not from Veronica, but from the HOA board itself. A formal notice, claiming you violated community operational safety standards by leaving a motorized vehicle running unattended with a minor inside. They fined you. $500. It was surreal. Your daughter nearly died. The woman responsible had been arrested, was on every news broadcast in the region, and yet they were citing you for a technicality. You read the letter 3 times. Then you walked into your office, opened your laptop, and pulled up your legal insurance contact. You'd never used it before, but this time you activated the full firepower because the HOA had just made a fatal mistake. They didn't just protect Veronica, they tried to punish you for surviving her. You weren't just a grieving father anymore. You were a plaintiff, and your attorney, she wasn't subtle. She filed suit within 48 hours, negligence, emotional distress, disability discrimination, retaliation, HOA misconduct, and she named the entire board. Word spread fast. Residents started to whisper, then speak out, then post anonymously. Turns out Veronica had a long list of corrective interventions. She'd fined a family for putting up Halloween decorations too early. She'd banned solar panels for being aesthetic disruptions. She'd called code enforcement on a veteran for flying the American flag without proper documentation. No one had stood up to her until now. And when she tried to countersue for defamation, your lawyer dropped the footage in the courtroom like a bomb. The judge paused it mid-frame. Your daughter's face in the car, flushed and panicked, and said quietly, "You're lucky this isn't a criminal trial." Because of the truth, the only reason Veronica wasn't behind bars that day was because your daughter had lived, and that the living was the miracle. Everything else was consequences. One by one, the HOA board began to resign. First the treasurer, then the compliance officer, then the vice president. They weren't all evil, just complicit, silent, passive, while Veronica ruled the block like a petty tyrant with a clipboard crown. And now the silence was breaking. Neighbors started knocking on your door, not with complaints but apologies. One woman brought a sketch her daughter made of your ramp covered in flowers. Another baked banana bread. A teenager wrote your daughter a card in big colorful letters. You are a sunshine warrior. You framed it, hung it by her bed, because through all the heat and heartbreak, your daughter never stopped fighting, and neither would you. By the end of the month, the HOA meeting looked nothing like it used to. Gone were the smug glares, the half-full coffee urns, the neighbors who came just to complain about hedge heights or mailbox colors. Now folding chairs were packed wall to wall. People stood along the sides, clutched folders, took notes. The air buzzed, not with hostility, but with awakening. You weren't planning to speak. You were just there to observe. Support your wife, who now sat on the board herself after a unanimous community vote. The neighbors had seen what happened, and they wanted real change. But then the mic was passed to you. They asked if you had anything to say. You stood. You didn't raise your voice, didn't hold a grudge in your tone. You just told the truth. You spoke about how power in the wrong hands becomes a weapon, how a clipboard and a title don't make someone righteous, how silence can be just as cruel as action. You told them what it felt like to see your daughter locked in a car she couldn't escape, what it felt like to see the woman who did it, smiling. And you ended with this: I don't need you to fix what happened. Just promise me you'll never let anyone else wield authority without accountability again. Not here, not ever. The room was silent, and then applause. Slow at first, then thunderous. Not for what you endured, but for what you'd exposed. Because now the truth had a face, a name, a timeline, and the community couldn't unsee it. But Veronica. She wasn't done trying to control the story. From her lawyer's office, she issued a statement claiming she had concerns for the child's safety and that she was acting in accordance with local environmental regulations. The press ran it briefly, but no one bought it, especially not after a third neighbor stepped forward with even more damning footage. Veronica had tried your car door twice before you even entered the house that day. She'd been watching, lurking, waiting. That footage sealed it. The DA reopened the criminal case, and this time they didn't stop at child endangerment. They added unlawful entry, tampering with a motor vehicle, harassment of a disabled person, 3 felonies. Veronica was taken into custody again. No porch this time, no clipboard. Just a booking photo and a headline: HOA president arrested for second time in disabled child incident. You didn't celebrate, because justice isn't about punishment, it's about clarity, about truth replacing confusion, about never letting what happened to your daughter happen to someone else's. And that clarity had ripple effects. The HOA bylaws were rewritten. Accessibility was prioritized. A new clause was added. Any act of interference with medical or mobility aids will result in immediate legal referral. But perhaps the biggest shift, people started looking at each other again, saying hello, checking in, bringing soup when someone's porch light stayed off too long. Sunstone Ridge became what it was always supposed to be: a community, not a compliance regime. And your daughter, she found her joy again. It took time. But one afternoon, she rolled herself down that same ramp, her hat tilted sideways, sun in her eyes, hands gripping the wheels, and stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. You watched from the porch, heart pounding, unsure what she was doing. Then you saw it. She pointed to the flowers. The marigolds still bloomed. Someone had added daisies. A pinwheel spun gently in the breeze. She giggled, a quiet, breathy sound, but unmistakable. And you felt your knees buckle as the moment wrapped around you. She was okay, not because the system worked, but because you refused to let it fail her. And others finally followed. Because sometimes it only takes one person to stand up before others realize they can too. And sometimes that one person just happens to be holding a child in their arms when they do. The trial was swift. The evidence was overwhelming, the jury attentive. Veronica's defense centered on community duty, and misunderstood intentions collapsed under the weight of time-stamped footage, expert testimony, and your daughter's medical report. Even her attorney looked worn down by the second day. You testified calmly, clearly refusing to let your anger speak louder than your facts. And when the verdict came guilty on all 3 counts, there was no cheering, no outburst, just silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm when the sky finally admits what it's done. Veronica was sentenced to probation, community service, mandatory mental health counseling, and barred from serving on any community board or HOA for life. It wasn't prison, but it was a public record. a lifetime brand of truth. And in many ways that was enough, because what mattered more was what changed. The HOA board was now 70% new. The old guard, those who defended Veronica, enabled her, or simply looked away, were gone. A community inclusivity committee was formed, chaired by your wife. They rewrote guidelines to include rather than exclude. Your daughter became the neighborhood's quiet symbol of resilience. Every birthday, neighbors left small tokens, wine chimes, painted stones, origami birds on sticks all along the edge of her ramp. No one ever touched the marigolds again. And you were no longer the guy whose daughter got locked in the car. You were the reason it never happened again. People came to you now not for conflict but counsel. A veteran neighbor asked you to review a zoning complaint. A single mom needed help with a noise citation. The guy who once filmed from behind his flower box now waves with both hands when he sees you. And every Sunday morning when the air is still cool and the sun paints gold on the fences, you walk beside your daughter as she wheels herself down the ramp. Not rushed, not afraid, but free. Because justice isn't just punishment, it's transformation. It's a neighborhood learning how to protect its most vulnerable. It's one father once trembling with fury, now calm with resolve. And it's a little girl, safe in her own front yard. Because that yard, that ramp, that car, they belong to her too. Always did, always will. So now as you settle into stillness, let your mind drift back to that quiet suburban street, to the ramp lined with marigolds, to the girl in the sun hat, to the father who stood between silence and justice. Breathe in deep. Feel the weight lift off your chest. Not just because the story found its ending, but because something within you feels seen. Maybe you felt helpless in the face of rules that didn't care. Maybe someone tried to make you small. Maybe you've watched others shrink back, waiting for anyone to speak. And maybe, just maybe, that someone is you. You don't need a badge or a title, just a spine, a steady voice, a willingness to stand still while the world tries to push you down. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not move. And sometimes the smallest person in the story is the one who teaches everyone else how to be big. So tonight, let that truth hold you. Let it breathe with you. Let it ease into your chest like warmth after rain. You are not powerless. You are not invisible. And if the moment ever comes where you're called to stand, you'll know what to do. Now close your eyes, feel the breeze, and let the marigolds bloom behind your eyelids, quiet and golden. You're safe now. You're home.